All right.
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Snap with your two favorite hosts, K1 and K2. We're like Thing 1 and Thing 2. Alrighty, in this episode, we're going to bring you our first ever Beefer the Beaver ratings.
Yeah. So
Yay!
this is a strict power rating. So the question we asked ourselves when making this rating is if every team plays at 100%, they get absolutely every last drop out of their roster. No one's injured, no one's out, no one's having an off day. Who wins the game? And that's what we did. We used some sim technology to help us figure that out, and we're going to deliver those rankings today. We've also got, this is a blockbuster of a show, y'all. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like, leave comments. We appreciated all the loving comments we've been getting for y'all. That is why we do this, and we enjoy it immensely. So thank y'all very much. But what we're going to give you today is an absolute blockbuster of a show. Like I said, like Kirtan said, we got B for the Beaver ratings. We'll tell you what that stands for in a minute. But power rankings, top 25, our poll, second. We've got your playoff predictor, which is a mess, man. We've both made one. They're completely different. We're going to see. We're probably both wrong. And then third,
Probably.
we've got bold predictions. It is a stacked show, absolutely packed full, chock full of good content for y'all. It is almost football season. We did the math today. We should have 5 more shows before we end up in the midst of it. August 24th, when everything kicks off. Our high school football is ramping back up, and we're really looking forward to it. But we do have one announcement. We should be live almost every Monday or Sunday at 5:30. It's going to be Mondays for the rest of the summer, and then it'll transition to Sundays so we can get you those game recaps. We can get you ready, and we will try to be live at 5:30, just like we were today, every day. We'll try and let you know if that's been delayed or moved, but hopefully you can tune in live, get your information as up to date as possible, because this is the first place it's posted before it goes on the podcast or elsewhere.
Yep.
So, Kirtan, who is ranked at 25 in the B for the Beaver inaugural ratings?
We have the team known as the Cyclones from Iowa State.
Yeah.
So, real quick before we start our ratings, we just want you to know what BEFER stands for. So, it took us many days to come up with this BEFER acronym. This stands for Beyond's Football Excellence Rating. We know that you have your JP ratings, you have the other one from On3. None of those matter. I'm telling you, none of those matter.
This is the one, man. This is the one.
The only legitimate one. Where you want to get real information from, we're right here. We're like CNN, baby. Real information only. Anyways, yeah, I know that was a little sketchy. Maybe not CNN. Maybe CNN was a bad acronym. BBC Network from England, because I'm pretty sure they are right down the middle. Anyways, why did we pick the Cyclones? Well, Iowa State plays in the Big 12, of course, and by no means are they favored to even come relatively close to where they currently are, or come close to winning the Big 12. But we're going on a platform of just saying these are the best. How do I best describe this? We're going on a platform basically saying that if each team had all the energy in the world, if each coach was coaching to his best ability, if each player was playing to their best capability on their Heisman level, who would come out on top? And we said out of all the 134 FBS teams, we think the team that would crawl into that top 25 spot and number 25 would be Iowa State. We think they're just a solid team. They have a solid run game. They've proven themselves to be a great team by contesting against other Big 12 schools. And again, down here towards the bottom, it gets hard to really pick. So we just went with teams that we believe match up well with the teams you're going to notice every so often we're going to talk about. So whoever's number 24 matches up just slightly better than the team at 25. The team at 19 matches up slightly better than the team at 20. That's how we did it. Can you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so really Iowa State is in a good position here. They've got an amazing quarterback returning in Rocco Beck. I think he's poised to make a big leap this year. And again, if he plays at his full potential, they are a top 25 team. They have multiple weapons that are returning, and it's really a team that's beginning to coalesce. You can see the whole structure start to come together, both offensively and defensively. And the coaching staff is where it needs to be, and I believe that they deserve this 25th spot. Now, another addition that I want to make, these rankings, not every week, but after every week of the season, so week 1 through week 14, they will change based on wins and losses and results we see on the field in terms of power ratings and where we're convinced they are. Again, this is the hardest, least contextualized one, but we will change it, and hopefully those will inform some of our game predictions as we get into that, which I am super excited for. But moving on to number 24.
Yep. And at 24, we have the Wildcats, the Kentucky Wildcats, the blue team. Anyway, so why do we put them at 24? Well, there's a little bit of uncertainties that they have. Of course, they're starting Brock Vandegrift, the transfer from Georgia. He's really an uncertainty. We don't know how well he's going to be able to perform because he wasn't able to get any snaps last year as he backed up Carson Beck. We also don't know how Chip Trainum's going to do. I believe Chip Trainum transferred in from Kieran, you remember who he transferred in from?
Yeah, no, that's a blank.
I
Sorry,
know
guys.
he
The transfer portal is insane.
Yeah, but he was one of the teams that we highlighted very early on. I believe week 1 that we started our podcast, episode 1. Go check it out. Link in the description. We talked about how it's a very good move for him, and he's going to be able to dominate. But again, we don't know at what level because now he's in the SEC. But what is the reason why they got put at number 24? It's the defense. Kentucky's always had a really good defense, and the big talking point about them is that their linebacker unit is one of the best. I believe it's ranked top 5 in the PFF for linebackers. And on top of the defense, they also have stars like Deion Walker, who's going to contribute to a very good secondary and help build up that secondary line, especially in this very competitive SEC. And of course, we're saying if they're firing on all cylinders, we think they can match up well with Iowa State and the team that we're going to mention after Kieran gives his reasons.
Yeah, so I think Kirtan was spot on there. Chip Trainum transferred from Ohio State in the running back whirlpool, as I'm calling it. And we will see Ohio State later. Spoiler alert. But yeah, moving on to the team in the number 23 spot, North Carolina State, the Wolfpack.
Yeah. So North Carolina State, they're a very good team. They're going to be playing in the ACC. Now, I don't know much about them. I haven't been able to follow their game that well. But I do know that they're going to be playing very competitive football. They are a great team with great surroundings. I don't know that much about them, so don't blame me on this one. But I do think they're going to be very competitive, especially in the ACC landscape where you got teams like Miami, Clemson, you have teams like Florida State, and we think that they're going to be a competitive team. They've always been around an 8-win team, which is very good for their standards, and I think that they're going to just be amazing come college football season. So, Kieran, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the one big note with NC State is that while they have lost defensive production, i.e., some of the best linebackers and also in the secondary to the NFL, although unfortunately injury issues kind of caused him to drop down the draft. But they got a transfer in from Coastal Carolina, Grayson McCall. He's going to be their quarterback. He's their guy, and he's really the reason they're at 23 and not lower. And I also think they just built a solid team. Again, the bottom 5 teams are just solid teams. It's hard to pick out individual pieces because the whole thing in general is the solidness of the team that's coalescing and causing them, when they perform at a very high level, to be one of the top 25 programs in college football. So, yeah, Kirtan, moving on.
Okay, moving on, we got the number 22 team, and this one we're going to go with the favorites to win the Big 12, the Utah Utes. Some reasons why we put them here is because they have a really, really good offensive line, and I honestly would say one of the best offensive lines in the nation. I don't know a couple players that are on their offensive line. I know for sure Nick Ford, he's going to be on there. Simi Moala. But their offensive line is very star-studded. They have really good line players even on their ends with Brant Cootie. He's very good at his position. Their quarterback, however, is going to be a change as Cam Rising has exited. So that's another weakness that they have. But also, their defense is a little sketchy. They do have returning players like Devin Lloyd, who's going to come back and play linebacker for them. but it's just not where you want it to be because I don't feel like they're going to be able to be adequate enough to start off the season against teams of a really strong offense. So Oklahoma State, for that matter, talking about Ollie Gordon, Kansas State. I know Kansas State did have a transfer quarterback, but they are going to be a really good team, meaning their quarterback transferred out to Ohio State. But yeah, that's why we believe they're going to be a 22. Or yeah, 22, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is the first in a series of perhaps surprises. There are teams that the odds are worse for them to win the Big 12, favored above them in this poll, and that's just because we think their ceilings are higher. And really, Utah is an interesting team to rate. They've had quarterback struggles, and they've lost quarterbacks. They had injuries last year that really kind of plagued them. But to me, Utah's always been a very physical team, and they warrant being in this ranking, even if they're not my favorite to win the Big 12. And I certainly don't think that they're Kirtan's favorite. So that's kind of just a, it's there's certainly a chance they could win the Big 12, but that's why they're lower down the order. We just don't think that they're exactly who's going to be able to pull it out at the end of the day, and we think that they have a much lower ceiling compared to other teams above them. So moving on to team number 21, we have
Yeah.
Virginia Tech.
Yeah. Okay, so things that you need to know about the Hokies is that they are really strong, especially at the quarterback position, as they have Logan Thomas announcing that he's going to come back for another senior year. So that's another, or for his senior year. So that's a really good strong point that they have. They have a veteran quarterback who's been in the system, who's been learning for all these years, and now is going to make the move. I believe they also have a really good starting secondary because whenever they match it with any team in their conference, they're always really good on the defensive side. And talking about defense and offense, I know that was a horrible transition, but their offensive line is also very good. They're very tall positions. I believe their average height over there is around 6'4". I read a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to be really good for lining up against rushers, especially on the other side. But however, some of the weaknesses are, if I'm remembering right, I'm pretty sure they're weak on their defensive line, as it's almost not adequate enough to start, as well as they really don't have anybody there that's really been proven to make a big impact in the game. So I would have to say that if we were in a game between Virginia Tech and Utah, we would still lean towards Virginia Tech.
Yeah, they also have an amazing. They're gonna have. I'm warning you. This is your little insider snap. They're gonna have one of the best run games in college football. They have an incredible double duty quarterback in Kyron Jones, who's going to be able to both pass and run the ball. And then you've also got a very solid O line and a solid punch that's a whole mix of running backs that's really going to enable them to take that next step. And that's why they're ranked at 22, because they should not be the least physical team on the field at any one of their matchups this year.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the top 20. So breaking in the top 20, we have a team from the SEC, a blue blood, the Florida Gators. Now, the big thing about Florida is that they've had a really good recruiting class, and honestly, their entire offense is really their strong point now. As they're well rounded at every position, of course, we know that they got their quarterback of the future, DJ Lagway, who's already moved from Texas now over there. They're a really talented team, except the only part that's a little indecisive for them is that their pass defense. Last year, their secondary was getting cooked by essentially every team that they faced. They weren't able to play up to their standards, and they were getting cooked from even the littlest teams from like Georgia, you can say. I know they're a big school, but they were getting cooked from all places, especially covering Brock Bowers. I'm pretty sure Brock Bowers, that game, had a field day. I remember he caught a couple passes behind his back, but that's where they're really lacking. But the good thing about them is that they're trending in the right direction, and now they're moving in with a top 10 offensive line in the nation, a quarterback of the future, and weapons at every position that DJ Lagway has availability to.
Yeah. So also another good reason to put in there for Florida is Graham Mertz. He had a really sneaky good season last year, and with better supporting pieces and a better supporting cast, which he should have this year, he's going to be lights out. So moving on into the top 20 firmly now. At 19, we have Kansas State. So Kansas State, very physical team, very really top notch in a lot of different aspects of the game, but also at quarterback. I think Avery Johnson's poised to take a big step. And again, remember, this is if they play at their max potential. And if they do that, I think they are the 19th best team in the nation. Kirtan?
Yeah. Okay, so I know Karen just mentioned Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson was phenomenal last year, and he's going to make an even bigger leap. I feel like he's honestly, I would say behind Ollie Gordon, he'd probably be the favorite or one of the favorites to win Big 12 Player of the Year. Outstanding talent. But on top of what Karen said, you can also see other things that they display. So they have a really good run defense that was only allowing roughly, I think it was 3.5 yards per carry against every other team they played. They were again holding Texas back. So of course, Texas wasn't playing with their starter Quinn Ewers at the time when them and Kansas faced. But of course, it was Malik Murphy, who's also considered a really good quarterback. But they went into Texas. They took the game to overtime. They almost ruined Texas's chances of even making the playoffs. And so that just tells you that they're going to be a really solid team. Things that they have to avoid though are like their return. Their return team is really not that great, and their secondary is not up to par for where their defensive line is. Okay, moving on from Kansas State, we got Oklahoma State. Kieran, what about them do we need to know?
Ollie Gordon and the run game. They're returning, I believe it was something like 41,000 snaps along the offensive line, somewhere in that region, which is, I believe, almost at least 50 games, if not more, combined between the offensive linemen. And there's going to be a veteran offensive line, and you have Ollie Gordon, who is perhaps the most creative player in all of college football. You saw how highly he was ranked in EACFB 25. And so he's really, really going to be an impact player. And the one concern is if their quarterback, Alan Bowman, can reduce the turnovers. He had a ridiculous number of interceptions. Now, some of those were against Texas, and they made themselves look foolish in that game. But he had turnover issues. But if they can lock that down, if Alan Bowman can play the senior veteran quarterback play we expect him to and know he can, that's what makes Oklahoma State my favorite to win the Big 12.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get into that later, who's the favorite, because I did go with the favorites, Utah, but we're going to get into that later. Anyways, why are they up here and all this and as high as they are? Well, Ollie Gordon. Anyways, it's their run game. Their run game is one of the best in the nation. Kieran already said it. Ollie Gordon was rated one of the highest players, if not the highest player in the entire nation, projected to be a top 10 pick in the next upcoming draft. Depends on really how much they value running backs now. But he is an outstanding talent, as well as we're forgetting about their wide receiver core. Now, I watched most of the wide receivers, but after they lost a lot of players, including Justin Blackman, Josh Cooper. But they're having returns in Tracy Moore. Their tight end is coming back. And this is just building to their overall wellness. But again, Kieran also said their weaknesses are really their quarterback. The quarterback was very, he almost seemed rushed in every decision he made. He didn't make the proper read often. They got embarrassed by Texas come that Big 12 championship game. And including their red zone, I was just looking at film over the last couple of games. So I watched the Georgia-Florida State game. I watched the Georgia-Alabama game. And they are really, really bad in the red zone. For some reason, they can't convert. They always settle for a field goal. And they can't play up to expectations because then they get out of this flow. They're almost like they're a dominant run game because they know Ollie Gordon is so good. But when they get to that red zone and people start cracking down on Gordon, they really have nowhere else to turn to. And so that can open up some holes for the future. That's why I didn't pick them to be the top team. And, of course, in this upcoming year. But following them, or I guess in front of them, is actually another team from Texas. And it's Kieran's favorite team. It's the A&M Aggies.
First of all, Oklahoma State is not from Texas.
Oh, yeah.
They're not the same state. There is a Red River for that. Yes.
It is Kieran's favorite team, though, you know.
The Aggies, oh yeah, totally. Definitely my favorite team. I love the Aggies so much. And speaking of Aggies, Connor Wigman. And To me, he is what makes or break this team. If he's able to play on top, they have the weapons. It's Texas A&M. There are people there. They will be able to catch the ball. They lost Evan Stewart to Oregon, which is unfortunate. They lost Walter Nolan to Ole Miss, which is unfortunate. And they have lost a lot of pieces, but they can replace those pieces. They have all of the oil money in the world, except for the oil money that's at UT. You know, and to me, Texas A&M, they're a strong team, and if they play to the top of what they can do, Mike Elko he's a good coach. I loved watching him at Duke. I'm gonna hate watching him at Texas A&M. That's unfortunate. Hate coaching carousel, but whatever. Ultimately, Texas A&M has the chance to be one of the better SEC teams. Now there are a bunch of SEC teams ranked above them because their roster's better, but Texas A&M has a good enough roster to be that SEC team if they are on it, on it. Kirtan.
Yep. And strengths for A&M is their defense. So, of course, you can look at the transfer portal and say who was one of the biggest players, if not the biggest player that entered the transfer portal, and that was, of course, Walter Nolan. But it's again, it takes and it gives. And so, including Walter, with the loss of him, they're still very, very well set up for their upcoming for the upcoming season on each part of the defense. So we're talking secondary, linebackers, and their defensive line. They're still a really star-studded team, and they're now rebuilding that name. After 2 years ago, they were ranked number 6 in the country, favored to be one of the top teams. They did have a really big regression, but now it's starting to come back. The flow is starting to come back, and they're trying to return to the top. Now, some of the things that we need to talk about is their offensive line is really not that strong. Besides from a couple of good tackles, their guards are really, really poor, and it's going to affect Weigman's proficiency. Yeah, I think that's a word. And it's really gonna affect how good he is. Come like come how much time does he get in the pocket? How much time can he get to make throws? Because I really think he's also a great quarterback, and that's why another reason I'm so excited to watch the what do you call it, the battle, the A&M versus Texas battle, because I think Quinn Ewers again is a little overhyped for where he should be. And I think Connor Weigman's a little overlooked. And so that's going to be a good matchup to see which quarterback deserves all the recognition. Anyways, moving on, we're talking about the where are we? Number 16 team. This is another team on the other side of the Red River for us. The main team, Oklahoma and Oklahoma Sooners. Kieran, why does the river run red?
Because Oklahoma's stupid. No, my bad. Because Oklahoma's good at football. They have a new quarterback. Unfortunate. Sucks to lose your transfer quarterback to Oregon. Not that I would know anything about that, but you know. And they've got some solid returning pieces on defense. They have Danny Stutzman, who has had some interesting games in the past. Red River rivalry 2 years ago is all I'm going to say. But
What about last year?
that's not important. And they've got some solid pieces that are returning on defense, but there are still some concerns. I don't think their roster is as elite and as well rounded as the teams above them in the SEC. So I think they're a solid tier 2 team in the SEC. They can bring the hurt to a Missouri and Ole Miss, right? Teams like that in that kind of caliber. Across the pond in the Big Ten. I guess not across the pond, across the cornfield. And Penn State, a team like Penn State, teams like even Michigan at sometimes, if Oklahoma's on it, they can win some games. We've seen that. That was proved last year. And if they're not on it, they can lose to Kansas. So it's a swing team, but at their highest end, I think 16th is pretty fair.
Yeah. And I'll speed through these just so we don't keep people waiting. We get to the meat of the story. Their defense is really immaculate. They have one of the strongest secondaries, top 10 in their class for secondary. And weaknesses are the entire offensive line essentially got decimated come the draft, and all of them were considered seniors. And that was one of the big things going into the reason why they were actually able to be efficient last year. Of course, what we saw what they did in the Red River Showdown, but who was the main character in that Red River Showdown? That was Dylan Gabriel, who just so happens not to be there anymore. So now they're going to rely on Jackson Arnold. Of course, that raises questions on if he can perform at the same level, how good is he really, and questions like that. But yeah, we said at their best, they're only going to be here at 16. Anyways, moving on to our first ACC team that we mentioned, I believe.
NC State,
No,
but
second,
yeah.
second, yep, second. Well, one of the teams that's favored to win it all in the ACC, Florida State. And so, Kieran, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Florida State's a solid team. You got DJ Uyunglele. You haven't lost everything on defense. You did lose Jared Verse, but you've still got some solid pieces on the edge and then also in the secondary. Your wide receiver core was decimated, but I have faith that Mike Norvell can bring some new guys in. Great coaching staff, and at their top, I think 15th is a solid spot for them.
Yeah. Basically, what Kieran said, Kieran hit it on the head. Mike Norvell is going to be able to provide just because I think he's a great coach. And I think he's going to be able to really elevate his team no matter how bad they were decimated last year again by the draft. DJ Uyunglele, he has now made his third move from first being at Clemson, then jumping over to Oregon State, now literally going transcontinent and heading all the way over to Florida State. I think he's going to have success. I feel like he's almost going to have a chip on his shoulder now because he's back home going against Clemson this year. He's going to have a urge to win. And so I think this team is going to be just a gritty team, especially what happened after last year with them being snubbed out of the playoffs. They're going to want some revenge. They're going to want to be that top tier team. And honestly, if I was them, I'd be pretty pissed right now that I'd only be ranked 15 because after they went undefeated, won the ACC, they're getting pretty disrespected. So I'm hoping that they come out swinging and they come out like hitting hard and going after Clemson, going after the ACC, and trying to make a return to the playoffs. Anyways, moving on the beefer scale, we got the Clemson Tigers. Hey, they're rivals. Karen, strengths, weaknesses, what
Yeah,
about them? Let's
so
see here.
Cade Klubnik has had issues. They lost a couple of backs to the draft, but other than that, Clemson teams, it's all there. It's all back. They can make it happen. And Dabo Sweeney and his stubborn old crotchety ways, I think will have a chance to say, yeah, we got rid of DJ Uyunglele. You're right. There was a reason we got rid of him, and we just beat the team that has him, right? And if that
Yeah.
happens, that would be amazing. Obviously, he won't say that. He's more restrained. But I think that could happen. And I think Clemson is just that little bit better. And the pageantry and the tradition and the players who are back and the high school recruiting, I think is going to give them a solid edge and be one of the sharper end of the ACC.
Yeah. What else can I speak about that? So yeah, Karen was right. Kate Klumnik has had his struggles. He really hasn't been performing as well as I've been hoping, as well as the entire Clemson world has been hoping. But Clemson's still not down for the count. So Clemson, of course, has gone through probably a sadder regression, a slower regression than A&M did. But they were considered probably the number one team in the nation for for 6, 7 years ago. They were considered the number one team in the nation, and that was consecutive. It was them, Bama, them, Bama, them, Bama, them, Bama. Now they've fallen off the hill a little bit. Kieran said it. Dabo is going to be stubborn. He's never going to use the transfer portal because he doesn't believe in it. But again, the pieces are there. Your running game, however you lost Will Shipley, you're still going to have a dominant running game. You still have a really good, strong offensive line. And your linebackers and secondary are up to par, especially with Maffa, who's really good at his position. And I feel like it's just going to be a strong team. Again, you're trying to claw your way back up, and it's the same thing for the ACC. Just try to get back to the top of the hill, and I believe you can. Alrighty, moving on, we have the last team in the ACC, I believe, that we are going to mention, and that is the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Kieran,
So we
what do we
got
know about them?
Miami at lucky number 13. Um, they have one of the best quarterbacks, I think, in the nation. If Cam Ward is on it, if his weapons are on it, Miami is dangerous. Their defense is good enough, and I think if every team in the ACC plays lights out, plays their heart out, and leaves nothing on the table, I think Miami takes it, and that's why they're 13th.
Yep, and what else can I say about that? Their offensive line is very strong. Their quarterback, especially now that he's come in, Cameron Ward is going to be outstanding at at his position. I believe that they were honestly slept on. Of course, people saw what happened with Georgia Tech, and everyone questioned, are they really going to be good? I think their defense is going to be strong, and I do think that they are going to be one of the top teams. I just personally don't think that I think they're too young of a team, meaning they haven't been back to the playoffs. They haven't been back to the glory days since the 1990s, 1980s. And so now they're still going to have to be competitive with Clemson and Florida State. Alrighty, to keep y'all from waiting, we broke it into the top 12. So these are the teams that the Beaver scale believes should have made the playoffs. However, we know that the playoffs don't work like that. Anyways, we got the LSU Tigers. Kieran, tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, so they're going to have a super high offense. LSU is going to score points. They're going to have good wide receivers. There is a reason that's what LSU does. In terms of this is really a question of how much can their defense improve. We think a lot, mostly because the pieces are already there. LSU has what it takes. They have the weapons and the pieces, the little individual, the personnel. What you're missing is coaching and scheme. And their defensive staff improvements, I think, were some of the best in the country. They got a defensive line coach from Texas. They got coaches from everywhere. They pulled in the coaches, got them together, said, what the hell can we do to fix this? And I think they will, and that's why LSU is 12th.
Yep. Yeah. And so, what are they lacking? What did they have? What did they not have? Again, they are always a very strong receiving team. They are arguably wide receiver U, a great squad. They're going to put up points, like Kieran said. Weaknesses could be considered their offensive line, especially the big one I would say is leadership. Now that Jalen Daniels is gone, you're gonna have to look to your new quarterback to look for a leader, and that might cause some I don't know. It's going to cause some rifling between the team. It's going to cause some rift, and you're just going to try to keep this team again is great on paper if they can just come together as a unit. They're going to be so dominant, and they're going to be such a fun team to watch when they play Bama and Georgia. Alrighty, moving on to the 11th seed, we have Tennessee, another team in the SEC. Kieran.
Yeah, so Tennessee has has a crazy high ceiling. They have two of perhaps the best players at their position. One who is definitely the best player at his position, and James Pierce Jr. playing defensive end. I'm 95% sure that's his name. And they have Nico Iamaleava at quarterback, who could be a big breakout star. And remember 2 years ago when Tennessee had the number one offense in the nation? Imagine if that returns, because it very well could. And you could see a crazy good Tennessee that is super scary on Saturdays.
Yeah. Um, what else can I say about them? Just talking Nico Yamaleva, outstanding quarterback, especially what he did towards the end of the season when he got his actual start and actually got playtime. You can see that he's going to be a dominant figure. Tennessee has one of the best rushing. They're going to be a really good rushing team. They're going to be able to pressure the quarterback a lot, get into the backfield as fast as possible. And those two things are going to make it really hard, especially for quarterbacks that don't really escape the pocket. So you can argue Carson Beck will struggle. Other quarterbacks that aren't as mobile might not be able to climb the pocket as well, but other players like Jalen Milroe will be able to. And again, it's a hard environment to play when the crowd is in it, when everyone's clicking on all cylinders. They're just a fun team to watch and spectate. And so we believe that they're going to be so dominant, they're going to be at number 11. Cracking into the top 10. I know we're talking fast, but we don't want to keep you waiting because we still have to give you our playoff predictions and our bold statements. So let's just crack into the top 10. And starting top 10, we got Notre Dame. We got the Fighting Irish. Kieran, what do we know about them?
They're independent.
Yep.
They are very 4th of July type people. They're a solid team. Marcus Freeman has got it where he wants it. Notre Dame could make a championship run. There is that chance. They don't play super quality competition, but they do have the ACC scheduling arrangement. They don't play super quality competition, but they're a very solid team, especially defensively in linebacker and also in the secondary. They have a good running back. They're bringing in Riley Leonard. Could be a concern, but I think he'll play well. I think at Duke, when he wasn't injured, he was very, very good and definitely on the sharper end of the position. So I think he'll be amazing. And that's why I think Notre Dame should be ranked 10th.
Yep. Another selling point of Notre Dame is the fact that Notre Dame typically it's harder to scale, especially on the Beaver scale, because we gotta say if they're playing at their best. So Riley Leonard's gonna come into a whole new system. He's gonna have to learn how to basically work with his new wide receivers running back. But the best thing is Notre Dame is known for having one of the best offensive lines consistently every single year. And if you can turn over talent like that, it really makes life a lot easier for your quarterback. So in this case, Riley Leonard will be able to get the ball out to hopefully some of his talented wide receivers, including you now have your defensive coordinator who's actually have been has been proven. And overall, the only big thing is your defense is a question because we haven't really seen you play someone of the top five caliber in so long. Besides from, I believe they played Ohio State and they held their own. But again, we don't know really how you're going to fare against the top five teams. So we still think you're going to be dominant, but you're one of the hardest teams to scale. Next up, we have Michigan Wolverines. Kieran, why did they fall from being national champions?
Well, because they have quarterback concerns. And they lost a lot of players to the draft, which is obviously always going to be an issue, especially on offensive line and quarterback. Basically, in the box on the offensive side of the field is where I worry about Michigan. They will have a good O line because, again, their head coach is an O line coach. So that'll shore up. But they've still got five guys in the running for quarterback. 95% sure it'll be Alex Orji. Would be surprised if it's not. The question is, how much can he improve on passing? And how much does Michigan buckle down and keep their run identity due to the changes on the offensive front? But defensively, could be the best defense in the nation, maybe second to Ohio State. Have amazing defensive tackles. All the pieces are there. They very well could win a national championship again, guys. All it has to do is two things have to pan out, man. That's not that many, and it certainly could happen, and you know their mindset is in the right place. Kirtan?
Yeah. Defensive line, outstanding, really good. It's going to be able to stop prominent run teams, especially Ohio State. So that's going to be a fun matchup to see as Quinton Judkins is going to have to battle against one of the best defensive lines. Secondary, I mean, your entire defense at Michigan is outstanding, and you very much could run it back with some of the best cornerbacks in the nation, the best quarterback in the nation, and some of the best players at defensive line. Again, biggest question mark is the quarterback position. Will Alex Orji be able to produce to the level which JJ McCarthy was able to? Is he going to be as smart? We know that he has a big arm, but besides that, he's really unproven at his position. So we have to figure that part out. Anyways, moving on. We got number 8. We got Penn State. James Franklin. Karen, how do we feel?
Yeah, so the reason Penn State's above Michigan is not because I think they'll per se do better, but because I think they have more potential. If the questions are less. Their defense is also going to be good. Penn State's defense is good, and I think it'll be a continuation from last year of being good. The question is can their offense get into gear? Can they do it against higher level competition? And because we're presuming that they're playing at 100%, I think they would be able to in this scenario, and that's why they're ranked so highly. Kirtan?
Yeah. Again, you have Drew Aller, a very experienced quarterback, who's going to be coming back. You have a strong offensive line, which we always talk about. And Nittany is always known for their defense. Their defense is always immaculate. They always produce talents. Micah Parsons, for example, Chop Robinson, for example. They're going to be a feared team. I am only saying, like, the reason, again, Kieran and I put them above Michigan is because we think that Michigan has more uncertainties, or at least that's what I thought about it. As, again, Alex, or you cannot have someone new coming into you cannot have a new quarterback coming into your system, especially if he's unproven. And I think Penn State just has a very bulky team. They have been, they're very robust. They've been very well kept, and I think especially led by Drew Aller, which is returning for his third season, I believe. I think he's going to be really strong and a great quarterback, and honestly going to rival Oregon and Ohio State. Speaking of those two, we have a team known as Bama, which those two teams love to play. Karen, why is Bama down at 7?
Because there are questions, frankly. Their offense looks like it's going to be solid. I don't really have any complaints there. O-line good, quarterback good, check. But their defense. They've got guys. They will have guys. They will have success. But they lost a lot of their big playmakers on defense, i.e. Dallas Turner, and they lost some to the portal. So there is a certain question mark that I have about their defense. Can they hold up to the high-powered offenses, Georgia, at Texas, an Oregon, and Ohio State? I don't think so. I think they have less questions than Michigan, but I think they have more questions than every team ahead of them. and I think that's why they're so low. I don't think the expectations have changed, but I think that Bama having this much of a change and having the seventh best potential in all of college football is incredible, and I think they should be grateful for that. And they will be back on top. I don't doubt it. It's just that it's hard to lose that many pieces to the draft and replace with having a shortened schedule because you're a new coach.
Yeah. And Kieran basically said all that I was going to say. The big thing is that your offense, we know, is still going to be pretty good. Jalen Milroe is going to, again, come back with a chip on his shoulder, trying to get the win. Offensive line is always really strong, and you should always be proud of it. Running back, arguably one of the best running back, what do you call it, or universities that there even exists, especially Derrick Henry. We can talk about Mark Ingram. We can talk about all those guys, Najee Harris. But the defense is the issue. The moment Nick Saban retired, so many people. I think it was one of the biggest dumps. I think over 40, no, maybe not that much. I think 25, 30 kids left the program, and in hopes of finding a new home in the transfer portal. Some players returned back to Alabama, but a lot of them left, including the number one guy, Caleb Downs. So for that reason, I would have to say that they're being bumped down. But Kieran said it again. He said something that was so correct. The fact that you can have probably the biggest change to ever happen to the university in the last 20 years with Nick Saban leaving and being replaced with Kalen DeBoer, who's actually a very good offensive mind, that's going to say something. And now the fact that you're still at 7 just proves that with talent in the building, you're still able to produce to the best of your capabilities. And so for that reason, we have them at number 7. So a team that actually did really good and actually made a New Year's Eve or New Year's Six game, Mizzou. Why is Mizzou all the way up at 6?
Well, they're good. I think that if Mizzou plays their heart out, Brady Cook, you've got Luther Burden, the best wide receiver in all of college football, somewhat of a consensus there. And you have a defense that last year, they weren't great, but they were good. And they were able to hold teams and keep teams close for the offense to be able to get them. Yeah, Schraderia is gone. That's unfortunate. That's the big piece they'll have to replace. But other than that, they've still got the guys. And I think that's what's really important. And we'll be able to see hopefully a huge step forward. And Mizzou could be one of the premier SEC teams if they play their heart out. Now, I would predict Alabama to finish above Mizzou, but I think Mizzou, all things considered, could pull out just a little bit better when they're both playing at full throat.
Yeah. And we're saying this is our B4 rating. This is the excellence rating. We think that, again, Mizzou at their top performance versus Bama at their top performance is a better team because it's almost like they want it more. So what can we really talk about? Brady Cook, outstanding quarterback. He's going to improve himself even more this year, especially with the main weapon, Luther Burden, who is, I believe, the consensus wide receiver 1 in all of college football. And just the fact that you have him, the fact that you have a hungry defense that was able to pile stop, Ohio State in the New Year's Six game, shows you that even though Ohio State didn't have their best players out on that field, i.e. some of their wide receivers that were going in the draft, you still stopped Ohio State, and that should not be taken lightly because that game finished 13-6. So we still think that they're going to be an insane talent, and if they can just play with the edge that they feel, that the coach feels when he talks about their team, they're going to be back and they're going to be hungry for revenge. Anyways, moving on to our top 5, we have Ole Miss. Kieran, what do we know about Ole Miss?
Yeah, so Ole Miss, this is their year. They've sucked in all the transfer portal talent, and they're walking around like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I mean, talent's just busting out the seams for how much the facilities and the money that Ole Miss has. They've poured it all into the season, and if they don't get something out of it, it could be catastrophic for Lane Kiffin. So the expectations are high. They've got returning quarterbacks. They've got returning receivers. They've got Walter Nolan coming in. They've got so much just juiced and packed into that one team that I think if they all play to their top potential and all the pieces just slot in perfectly and fit with the culture and the play style and the schematics, they could be fifth best team. And I think that is a solid ranking, and I think that's where they deserve to be.
Yeah, and I think this is also a consensus ranking. Ole Miss, Kieran said, you have all the talent in the world now. You have talent from Jackson Dart, who's considered to be a great quarterback, all the way to Walter Nolan, who transferred in. You played the transfer portal to the best of your capabilities, and you probably outplayed every single team around you in the transfer portal. And now you're basically it's win or go home. It's boom or bust. Because again, if Ole Miss can't get it done, especially this season, the consequences are going to be dramatic. They're going to be horrible, especially on Lane Kiffin, because Lane Kiffin could be on the potential hot seat after being able to say that he was such a premier coach. But after what we've seen after spring training, after what we've seen from the portal, especially what they did without Walter Nolan, all this talent from the transfer portal last year, we still believe that they're going to be a top team, and Ole Miss is back. Anyways, moving into our top four, we have Oregon Ducks. What are our thoughts?
Yeah, so Oregon, really good team. Dylan Gabriel, amazing. They got Evan Stewart. They have weapons. They seem to be pretty solid along the lines of scrimmage. That'll be tested by them moving into the Big Ten, having to play against really, really top tier teams on the lines of scrimmage. And that'll also be tested by their just general the upgrading competition that they're having. And so eventually Oregon, I think, is going to be a very top team, but right now they think are only good enough for fourth at their highest potential, because I think other teams have a higher potential.
Yeah. Okay, and I totally agree. I think the big thing for Oregon is that you have probably the best offense, arguably in the nation. I think honestly, it's almost better than Georgia. It's almost better than Ohio State. I think you have one of the best premier offenses. You played outstanding in the Pac-12. Honestly, you could have made an argument to revive the Pac-12 after what we saw between Washington and Oregon. And you have a great coach behind you. You have all the pieces in place for you to have a really dominant season. And I think that's what we can expect. You're going to go toe to toe with Ohio State. I'm hoping that to be one of the best games of the season. And I think that you're going to be a really big problem come this new generation of football, this new era that we're going into. And you're going to feed off that success all the way back with Marcus Mariota. Alrighty. Top three, we got Texas, Ohio State, Georgia. Let's just rattle them off. Kieran, what are your thoughts on all three?
Okay, so Texas, perhaps very, very loaded team. They're missing some pieces, but if Alfred Collins steps up, Anthony Hill steps up, their offensive line is going to be stellar. If Quinn Ewers plays like the quarterback he should be and not the quarterback everyone gets, that would be amazing. If all the freshman wide receivers mature, play to their absolute peak top potential, if Isaiah Bond plays like Gravedigger or James Bond, whichever, take your pick, then Texas and the secondary pieces, Makuba and Calf and everybody that's been brought in, if they play like their hair's on fire and like they want to win a championship, third best, gotta be.
Yeah. Texas, the reason we put you up here is because you have dominance on both sides of the ball. Did lose a lot of good talent, especially on the defensive line, but one of the most stellar recruiting classes of last year. Bringing in players, you just need players to step up for you. Anthony Hill is a great shot by Kieran because we saw him even perform really well last year, and you know that he's only, I believe, a sophomore or junior this year, and so he's going to make a really big impact for your team. Additionally, on the offensive side of the ball, Isaiah Bond is one of your weapons. You have the I forgot the guy's name, but he was sitting behind both and um, Xavier Worthy and the Georgia. God, I cannot remind. Garen, what was Xavier Worthy's teammate's name? The wide
A.D.
receiver number
Mitchell.
2. A.D. Mitchell. He sat behind both of them. I will look for the name of him when I'm talking about the top 12. But again, Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, one of the best offensive lines. It's again, I feel like this is another boomer bust season. We don't know what we're going to expect from Texas, but we expect them to be outstanding. Number two, we had Ohio State. Ohio State, I mean, you have everything in the world. Literally, if you cannot perform with everybody that you have on your team, honestly, Ryan Day needs to be fired. Like, you have a great transfer quarterback from Kansas State. You have probably two of the premier running backs in the nation. You breed wide receiver talent. You have the best secondary players, including Caleb Downs, and you always have a par. You have a team above par on your defensive line. It really is boom or bust at this time that you just need to perform. And lastly, Georgia for me. Georgia's at the number one seed because Georgia just honestly has the best team on paper, has the best coach on paper, and everything's looking forward for you. You have Carson Beck, who's arguably going to be in the Heisman watch, if not one of the front runners for the Heisman. You have Malachi Starks in the backfield. You have the one of the top tackles in the world, and it really comes down to who's going to be able to perform to the best of their capabilities out of these three teams. It honestly could go any way, and you'll see that come our 12-team playoff pick. But that's how I'm going to put it. I think that they're the number one team just because when they play at their highest possible skills, they will be the number one team.
Yeah, I'm so freaking excited for this season, man. Like
Yeah.
that on a note to wrap up that segment, so excited. I mean, we went 50 minutes, 52 minutes talking about the top teams. Crazy. Absolutely insane. We're gonna bring back the Beaver Beaver. He will be here. There's gonna be a graphic, I promise you. That is my heartfelt promise to you. There's gonna be a graphic. We'll make it happen. The Beaver will be back into week 1.
And we're going to be doing the full thing every single week. So this Beaver rating, he's going to be a reoccurring theme. He probably won't change till the season starts, but then we're going to uprate it. Let's say Texas beats Georgia, so you'll see some changes, and we're just going to highlight the changes for you at where we think each team stands. Okay, jumping into our 12-team playoff, we know this is going to be a longer episode than expected. But I will give you my top 12 to make. This is the playoff, not the top 12 teams, but the 12 teams to make the playoff. I have at the 1 seed, I have uh, Georgia Bulldogs. Following Georgia, I have Ohio State, Clemson, and Utah. Those are going to be your 4 teams to win their conferences. Following that, we have your 7 next best, your 7 next best. So you have Texas to step up, Bama, then Oregon, followed by Oklahoma State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Florida State, and then your group of 5 team, Liberty. And Kieran, who do you have for your top 12?
We've got the number 1 spot, Ohio State. This is also factoring the conference champions, remember. Number 2, Texas. 3, Miami. 4, Oklahoma State. 5, Georgia. 6, Oregon. 7, Notre Dame. 8, Florida State. 9, Ole Miss. 10, Bama. 11, Penn State. And 12, Liberty.
Yeah, so you can see the changes that we have. So Kieran is predicting Texas to win the SEC, as well as Miami to win ACC and Oklahoma. So everybody except for Ohio State has changed for our top for our winners of the conferences, as well as Kieran added teams like Florida. I believe. Do we have any overlaps? I think we have every single team that he mentioned. I have on my thing, except for Ole Miss. I actually did not add Ole Miss. That might have been a blunder, but who knows? I actually don't think Ole Miss is going to perform as well as I think they are, but we'll just keep going. Sorry about the deal with that. Okay, so then the matchups for my side are going to be Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Utah. You all get a bye, so you don't have to worry about that. But then it will be Texas playing Liberty, in which Texas I predicted to win. Florida State playing Bama. I predicted Bama to win. Penn State playing Oregon. I predict Penn State to get a win. Notre Dame versus Oklahoma State, and I have Notre Dame winning. Kieran?
Yeah, so we've got my side. We have Georgia playing Liberty, Oregon playing Penn State, Notre Dame playing Bama, and Florida State playing Ole Miss in the first week. And my 4 teams that are out. So I have Georgia winning, Oregon winning, Bama winning, and Ole Miss winning to make the next bracket.
Okay, and then for top 4, are we going to go to the top 4?
Let's do the next 4 out and then go to the top 4.
Okay, so what do you mean? What do you expand on that?
So then after that, the matchup shift, right? So the 4 seed plays the the highest remaining seed. One seed plays the lowest remaining seed. So I would have, for example, Ohio State would play the lowest remaining seed, Bama. Texas would play in the next lowest remaining seed in Notre Dame. Or no, my bad. Play the next lowest remaining seed in um, Oregon. Wait, no, in Ole Miss. Then the number 3 team would play Miami, would play the next highest remaining seed, which would be Oregon. Then Georgia would play the number 4 team in Oklahoma State. So the next 4 out, I have Oklahoma State out, Miami out, Bama out, and Ole Miss out. So
Yep.
that's exactly what I was explaining, and I'll just do my top 4, give you my champion, and then we can argue.
Okay, so the next, yeah,
yeah.
and here I'll just do the 4 out. Okay, so after that we had, for mine, it was going to be Georgia playing Notre Dame, in which I said Georgia would win. Ohio State playing Penn State, where I say Ohio State will win twice. Clemson playing Bama, which I said Clemson will beat Alabama. And Utah playing Texas, in which Texas would win.
All right, yeah. So then, for my final 4, the 2 games are Ohio State versus Oregon and Texas versus Georgia. I believe they're the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl. Somebody check me on that. My champion then is Oregon versus Texas. I think Oregon would be able to find Ohio State's number like the 4th time they play. And I think Texas would beat Oregon. And I also think Texas would be able to find Georgia's number at some point, right?
Shocker.
So I picked Texas as the champion. I'm sure Kirtan probably picked Georgia. But I hope you understand. I hope you understand how chaotic and terrible that was for both of us.
Yeah, I actually didn't. I said it was going to be Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and Texas, in which Georgia will play Texas, and Georgia will win. I said Ohio State, Clemson, and I said Ohio State will win. And then it comes back to a rematch of the Chick-fil-A Bowl, in which Ohio State will get their revenge, and Ohio State will win the Natty Chip over Georgia.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So that segment was about as chaotic as the playoffs. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But now we move to, cue the drum roll, please. Drum roll. Come on. Where is it?
Oh, yeah. I got you. Ready?
Bold predictions. Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Bold predictions. All right, so this is like our 6th time doing this. We'll correlate it and collate it and do all the data with it later. But Kirtan, what is your bold prediction?
Okay, my bold prediction for this week's episode is that at some point in the season, Oregon is going to have some troubles on offense. Everyone's going to question, are they really as solid as they think they are? And Dylan Gabriel will sit the bench for Dante Moore. I'm just saying at some point this season, and I'm not saying 4th quarter like garbage time. I'm saying like at some pivotal 2nd quarter or 1st quarter when Dylan Gabriel's struggling, they're going to say, UCLA transfer, get up in here. And Dante Moore will start off. He might be bad. He might be great. That's my bold prediction. Dante Moore will get a chance to play, a fair chance.
All right, so has to be significant playing time, and has to be like meaningful, right? Okay, good. We're agreed on that. Totally bold. Love it. My prediction is also quarterback related. It may be a little bolder. It may be a little crazier. My bold prediction is that 2 quarterbacks in the Big 12, one quarterback in the Big 12 will be a Heisman finalist. And I'm going to specify to you who that quarterback is.
Okay.
That quarterback will be Rocco Becht.
Whoa, okay.
I'm feeling it, man. I think he's got it. That may be a throwaway prediction. It may be Avery Johnson who ends up being the Heisman finalist. Or
I think you were going to say Jalen Daniels.
No.
The Kansas guy.
No.
Wow, that's a shock.
We're rocking with Rocco, man. All right. So that concludes after over an hour. Nice episode here. our 22nd episode. Thank y'all so much for the support. We're going to hopefully continue to grow. Yeah. Thank you. Have a great night. See ya.
Peace.